everyone, good day and welcome to our channel, Alena Media TV. We are broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. My name is Elsa Abraham. We have some good news, and the good news is Alena Media TV would like to announce to our lovely viewers that we are expanding our programs. So kindly take note of our weekly activities. On Mondays, we'll report on COVID-19 and editorials. Tuesdays are African history. Wednesday, world news and editorials. Thursday, COVID-19 report and African news. Friday is world history. Saturday is African news and editorials. Another good news is we are starting a satellite broadcast very soon. This satellite broadcast will begin on the 20th of June 2020, which will also be Eritrean Martyrs Memorial Day. Kindly take note of our frequency. Nile Sat Vertical 12728. Symbol rate 27500. FEC 5/6. The frequency again. Nile Sat Vertical 12728. Symbol rate 27500 and FEC 5/6. We'll bring you more details after this short break. Kindly stay with us. Thanks so much for staying with us. Now, today, this is our headlines. Sudan Army and Ethiopia military in deadly clashes near border. Ethiopia security forces accused of grave human rights abuses. Now, the news in details. Sudan Army spokesman says fighting over past 3 days has left at least 2 people dead and 9 wounded. Clashes between Sudan's army and Ethiopia military near the border with Ethiopia over the past 3 days have left at least 2 people dead, a spokesman for the Sudanese army said on Thursday. In a televised statement, General Amar Mohammed Al-Hassan said that Ethiopian military, backed by the Ethiopian army, had begun attacking areas in Gadaref state in eastern Sudan on 26th May. Backed by the Ethiopian army, the military has attacked many areas along the border between Ethiopia and Sudan and have confiscated Sudanese resources, Hassan said. He said that at least 2 people had died and 9 been wounded in the clashes, including soldiers and civilians. Between 26th May and 29th May, Ethiopian military backed by the army have attacked the area of Al-Bekaa in Sudan, but the Sudanese army has repulsed them, said Hassan. But the clashes have continued and that has led to the wounding of 3 civilians and killing of 1 child. Also, 1 army officer has been killed and 6 other soldiers have been wounded. Referring to Gadaref, Sudan's official Suna news agency said Ethiopian military penetrated through the border and attacked agricultural projects and clashed with military forces in Baket's Norin camp. Sudan and Ethiopia have been engaged in ongoing talks over the demarcation of the borders between the two countries. And in our next story, Ethiopian security forces accused of grave human rights abuses. New Amnesty's report documents extrajudicial executions, mass detentions during security operations in Amara and Oromia. A rights group have accused Ethiopian security forces of continuing to commit great human rights violations, including extrajudicial executions and torture, since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took office in 2018. In its report on Friday, Amnesty International documented the arbitrary detentions of thousands of people and the forcible evictions of dozens of families from their homes, some of which were set alight during security operations in response to attacks by armed groups and intercommunal violence in parts of the Amara and Oromia regions. Abiy has introduced a series of sweeping reforms, including granting amnesty to thousands of political prisoners and repealing draconian laws. Since coming to power in April 2018, the initiation of broad domestic changes, along with efforts to end hostilities with neighboring Eritrea, a longtime foe, has won Abiy international praise and secured him the Nobel Peace Prize last year. But Abiy's tenure has also been plagued by ethnic conflict, with hundreds of thousands of people being internally displaced amid a worsening security situations. The violations depicted in the report are telling of unfinished business of reform in Ethiopia, including impunity for past human rights violations. Amnesty's regional director of Southern Africa and East Africa told Al Jazeera. The Ethiopian government did not immediately respond to Amnesty's report. Al Jazeera contacted the Ethiopian Attorney General and Ministry of Peace for comment, but did not receive a response at the time of publication. Amnesty also said government officers did not respond to its report. Under Abiy's reformist drive, the government in 2018 lifted a ban on several political parties, some of which had been designated terrorist groups. The move paved the way for the leaders of the banned groups to return to the ethnically diverse country and allowed the opposition parties to participate in long-awaited elections initially scheduled for August 2020, but now postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Amnesty said the opening up of the political space has coincided with politicians stirring up ethnic and religious animosities in their efforts to mobilize support, sparking intercommunal violence and armed attacks in several of the country's regional states. In response, the federal government set up security command posts to coordinate the operations of the military, police, and local militia. Amnesty reports a series of alleged abuses in Oromia, where security forces are waging a campaign against the Oromo Liberation Army. The group is the breakaway armed wing of the Oromo Liberation Front, an opposition party that pursued military struggle before its return to power, Ethiopia to pursue a peaceful agenda in 2018. Amnesty said it had collected evidence that at least 10,000 people suspected of supporting or working for the Ola were detained by security forces in rounds of mass detention that began in January 2019. It also said it had found evidence that at least 39 people were extrajudicially executed amid rising tensions in Oromia's East Guji and West Guji zones. Other documented abuses included multiple cases of torture by security forces, with various people interviewed by Amnesty speaking of severe beatings by the security forces. In one case, a woman suffered a miscarriage shortly after she was beaten. In Amara, Amnesty said at least 130 people were killed in intercommunal conflict in which the security forces were complicit, either through active involvement or failure to protect the affected communities. The group said regional police, militia, and local vigilante groups carried out multiple attacks targeting ethnic Kwament who seek greater autonomy, resulting in scores of deaths and the displacement of hundreds of people. From 10th January to 11th January 2019, the security forces and vigilante groups attacked a settlement in Methema with grenades and guns and set homes on fire. 58 people were killed within 24 hours as soldiers in a nearby camp failed to respond to cries for help, Amnesty said. The deputy head of the Amara Regional Peace and Security Bureau told the rights group the casualties could have been greater if the security forces had not been deployed, and also rejected the complicity claim. Agnes Callamard, the UN Special Reporter on Extrajudicial Killings, said that while it is very difficult for countries to effectively police environments hit by inter-ethnic or inter-religious conflict, as well as those experiencing independent armed groups or movements, arbitrary killings are feeding the cycle of violence. In my experience, national or local authorities rely on heavy-handed and violent security tactics in place of political engagement towards long-term reform to address historical grievances, Kalamad told Al Jazeera. In the case of Oromia, analysts believe the violence is largely attributed to the return of exiled opposition political parties following the opening up of the political space 2 years ago. When Abiy took power, he criticized the authoritarian practices of the preceding government, but he has not been able to completely change the character of the regime, but by making changes at the center. William Davidson, senior analyst for Ethiopia at the International Crisis Group, told Al Jazeera. He said the abuses are to a large degree a continuation of the violations seen under the previous government. The expectations were that when the OLF returned to Ethiopia, it would put down its weapons. Instead, a power struggle soon erupted between the OLF and the government, which led to the continuing violence, he said. According to Davidson, there is no immediate prospect of a peaceful resolution to the situation in Western Oromia, as the government seems intent on eradicating the Ola. The fact that there have been not yet been free and fair elections as promised, and that polls have been delayed beyond the government's term complicates the situation, he added. Daniel Beleke, the chief commissioner of Ethiopia's Human Rights Commission, told Al Jazeera that Amnesty's findings and ongoing reports of killings and arrests, particularly in the Oromia region, should be taken very seriously. He added, however, that we should not lose sight of the complex security context in which armed groups are destabilizing the area, and the fight within these groups is taking a heavy toll on civilians. In its reports, Amnesty acknowledged that the government has taken initial first steps towards improving the human rights environment in the country, but warned that a persistence of old-style patterns of violence perpetrated by the security forces threatens to derail sustained long-term gain. Fiseha Tekel, the Rights Group Ethiopia researcher, said there have been many positive developments after the coming into power of Abiy, but at the same time, the reported violations do not reflect well on the government. Looking ahead, Amnesty said it was concerned the rights violations and abuses will escalate during the upcoming general election period. It recommended that the Ethiopian government take measures to immediately order security forces to stop carrying out extrajudicial executions, arbitrary arrests, forced evictions, and destructions of property belonging to people suspected of supporting opposition political parties or armed groups. Amnesty further called for an end to the culture of impunity in security forces by demobilizing the units that were complicit in the violence and human rights violations. This is where we end our news for today. Please like, subscribe, let us know your comments on this episode. Thanks for watching.